Is this a great game or what? And happy October for everybody listening. Thank you for coming through all the way to October since the beginning of our first season. October baseball is here, and we have Ryan Zimmerman as our guest, a World Series champion in 2019, the greatest Washington National of all time. And, Dad, he is going to be an incredible guest.
Right. And today, Jeff, the postseason begins, and nothing in the world makes me happier than October baseball. But before we get to the postseason, we have to put a bow on the regular season because yesterday, Monday, the Braves and the Mets played a doubleheader for the ages. That first game was a game for the ages. It was a game for all ages. It's one of the greatest games baseball has ever seen, and it's a regular season game, and it was game number 161, and the Mets won that game. And the last two innings of that game, the back and forth was just unbelievable. And this is why Francisco Lindor was signed to all that money by the Mets, because he delivered the big two-run homer that ended up getting the Mets into the playoffs. It was an amazing game. So Steve Blomberg, our friend, who you know well, is the best Mets fan that I know, and he texted me about 6 times during the game, and one was, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen," and then he wrote, "That's it, I'm done," after the Mets fell behind, and then he wrote, "I'm back." I mean, that's the way Mets fans have been tortured by this team since they last won in '86. And Gus Ramsey, our pal, said, "I've never been so exhausted watching a game." It reminded me of Game 6 of the 1986 playoffs between the Mets and the Astros, which anyone who was there will never forget that. So baseball, for a chaotic situation, a near disaster, having to play a doubleheader on the day before the playoffs begin, were treated to one of the greatest games we've ever seen. It was fantastic.
And so that means the Braves and the Mets now enter into the playoffs. 3 NL East teams will be represented in the National League. And just for an update of the schedule, Dad, you've got the Detroit-Houston series that kicks off today, Kansas City at Baltimore, and then now the Mets will take on the NL Central winning Brewers, and the Braves will go to San Diego to take on the Padres. So that's kind of the way things are lining up. It's a very, very exciting time for Major League Baseball, Dad. However, at the end of this incredible day for baseball, a doubleheader, 161, 162. What an exciting day. At 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday night, Pete Rose, it was announced that he had passed away at the age of 83. Dad, this is just, I mean, as breaking as our podcast has ever been, a legend has passed away.
Right. And Pete Rose, of course, is the all-time hit king. He's one of the greatest players that I've ever seen. And he did a lot of bad things in his life, but nobody played the game harder than Pete Rose, and nobody cared about winning more than Pete Rose. And I'll start off, Jeff, quickly by personalizing it. The first story that I ever wrote for a newspaper about a major league player was about Pete Rose, and it was in the early 80s, 1980, I want to say. And the game in Philadelphia that night was delayed by rain by about 3 hours. So they finally restarted the game at 1:15 in the morning. And there are like 50 people left in the stands. It's like everyone wanted to go home except for Pete Rose, who was the oldest player, I'm pretty sure, on the field. So he singles, he steals second, he steals third, he scores on a fly ball, and the Phillies win the game because the oldest guy on the field is the only one who showed up really ready to go to play at 1:15 in the morning. That's who Pete Rose was as a player. Jeff, his timing as a player was just impeccable. He was always in the right place at the right time. There are hundreds of instances where you could say, how did he know to be right there? But his timing, Jeff, after he retired was absolutely terrible. He said and did the wrong things so many times, which has stained his legacy. It has stained baseball to some degree, and it has kept him out of the Hall of Fame. And I am very sad today because I had a pretty good relationship with Pete Rose. I saw all the warts like most of us have, but it's still sad when an all-time great player passes like that. And I'll leave you with one story on Pete Rose, Jeff. This is the only one you really, truly need to know. So he went to prison for 5 months for tax evasion. When he gets out of prison, he's 49 years old, and his son comes to pick him up at the prison. And the first thing Pete says to his son is, Pete Rose Jr., is there a batting cage near here? So Pete Rose Jr. says, yeah, there's one right down the street. That's the first place they go after Pete Rose is let out of prison after 5 months. He goes to the proprietor of the batting cage and says, what's the fastest machine you have here? And the proprietor says 85 miles an hour right over there. Jeff, 85 is bringing it. Trust me. So Pete Rose, who's 49 years old, he's been in prison for 5 months, steps in the batting cage. Of course, everyone at the batting cage now recognizes the hit king of all time is at the batting cage. So the first pitch comes in, and he whistles a line drive right back at the pitching machine, an absolute textbook swing. First swing he took after spending 5 months in prison. So he looks at all the people standing around the batting cage. He says, some things never effing change. He throws his bat to the ground and walks away. And that's Pete Rose, for good or for bad. You don't have to love him, but you have to recognize how much he loved the game, how much he cared about winning, and how hard he played the game.
Amazing, Dad. Great story. Let's continue on with our first October episode here. Any other takeaways wrapping up the regular season?
The Oakland A's have left Oakland, and I just want everyone to know how sad I am about this. They have been there for 57 years. Some of my greatest nights of my baseball life have been spent in that ballpark, and it's just not right that the city of Oakland and Major League Baseball and ownership of the A's could not figure out a way to keep them there. It is really sad. And it's really sad, Jeff, that Skip Schumacher and the Miami Marlins have parted ways. He's a really good manager. There are going to be a bunch of managerial jobs open this winter. He is going to get one of them. I guarantee it. And the only Skip Schumacher story you need to know, Jeff, is more of an Orel Hershiser story. But Skip Schumacher was 5 years old, big Dodger fan, waiting for his favorite Dodgers to come out after a game. And a bunch of the veterans kind of just rushed by him. And poor Skip Schumacher, age 5, was weeping. So Orel Hershiser, who was on the Dodgers, went up to him and said, look, I'm on the Dodgers. I'm not one of the star players, but I'm on the team, and I would be happy to sign your glove. And Skip Schumacher wore number 55, which was Orel Hershiser's number for the majority of his career, as a tribute to Orel Hershiser. Just another reminder, Jeff. All you got to do is look at a kid, take care of him for 30 seconds. You will have a fan for life. And in Skip Schumacher, he has such a great feel for people and for the game. That's why he's going to be a really good major league manager.
You know, it's pretty crazy for Orel to have that mindset, and then he later becomes one of those guys, one of those stars. What a special story.
Right. Also, Luis Ariz, who we've had on like every episode of the show in the last 6 weeks, he won a batting title in the National League. So now he has won 3 consecutive batting titles for 3 different teams. That's the first player since 1900 to do that. And his San Diego Padres are really good. And finally, you can't do a takeaway without mentioning Shohei Ohtani, first 50-50 man of all time. He led the National League in home runs and stolen bases the second half of the season. The only other player to do that was Willie Mays in 1955. And Ohtani finished in the top 2 in his league in home runs and steals. And the last time that was done was by Ty Cobb in 1909, who led the league in homers and in stolen bases. The difference is he only hit 9 homers, but that was enough to lead. So there were a million takeaways from the final week of the baseball season, Jeff. Those are just a few.
What about the game changer of the week? Can I guess it's this exciting month we have ahead of us?
Jeff, this isn't an exciting month. This is the greatest month of the baseball season. This, in my opinion, hopelessly biased, is the greatest month of the sporting season. There is nothing, and I mean nothing better than October baseball, and we are in for a free-for-all of all time. I have never seen in 45 years of covering baseball a more evenly matched postseason. There are no dominant teams. There are no prohibitive favorites. Everyone has a hole. Everyone has a weakness. If you can exploit it, you can not only get to, but you can win the World Series. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say 10, 11, maybe all 12 teams, if they get hot at the right time, could win the World Series. And I've never seen a season where I've actually felt that way, but I do this year, meaning some tremendous baseball is ahead.
We have to say, with the wild card round, Dad, that you are going to be calling tonight on ESPN. We have to talk about what game you're calling.
Right. We're doing the game at 2:30 Eastern time on ABC. It is Michael Kay, Todd Frazier, and myself with Alden Gonzalez on the sidelines, and we are doing the first pitch of the 2024 postseason. And I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am about that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And Todd Frazier, guest of the show back when we were at the Little League World Series. And what do you call him? The biggest 12-year-old?
Well, he is the biggest 12-year-old, but he calls me Big Dog all the time, which I'm still.
Hey, Big Dog.
Nothing could be further than the truth, calling me Big Dog. But whatever. Love Todd Frazier. Can't wait to work with him and Michael Kay and Alden.
It's going to be a great, great series among many wild card round kicking off on ESPN today. But let's get into our Kurkjians,
right now,
the more goofy side of baseball.
Right. Now, this may be the last time we do this on this show, Jeff, because, you know, the playoffs are too important for quirky, weird things. But I have a million of them. I'm going to keep them to 4. Xavier Edwards of the Marlins hit 3 triples, Jeff, in one game. First player since Yasiel Puig in 2014 to hit 3 triples in one game. Just for some sort of context, Justin Smoke, former major leaguer, not that long ago, hit 2 triples in his career in 4,153 at-bats. And Xavier Edwards hit 3 in one game. The White Sox, who we will mention later on, because you can't do a baseball podcast, without mentioning the White Sox. They had 9 triples all season. Xavier Edwards had 3 in one game. As always, Jeff, lots of strikeout notes with the Kurkjians. Giancarlo Stanton, who had a pretty good final month, struck out 4 times in a game for the 30th time in his major league career, extending his major league record. And I remind you, Jeff, Joe DiMaggio, Stan Musial, Tony Gwynn had 1 3-strikeout game. Bill Buckner and Mike Scioscia had 0 3-strikeout games. And Giancarlo Stanton has 30 4-strikeout games, which again speaks to the era in which we play.
Just swinging for the fences every time.
Right.
And if you don't hit a homer, you strike out.
This is what the industry has demanded. And Aaron Judge, who I think was the best player in baseball this year, the beauty of the sport, had a game the other day, 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts. And he's going to win the AL MVP unanimously. He is the first player ever to strike out 5 times in a game after hitting his 50th home run of that season. Just to show you how hard the game is. I say it all the time, Jeff. I don't know how anyone gets a hit anymore. But every once in a while, you miss location, and Aaron Judge hits at 500 feet. Well, the other night he went 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts.
Yeah, you can just ask Luis Ariz when it comes to how does anybody get a hit anymore. He seems to have figured it out.
Right. And last thing, Jeff, and you know how much I love names in baseball. This is a real stretch. But the other night, the Reds played the Cubs, and the winning pitcher was Tyson Miller. The losing pitcher was Buck Farmer. And the save went to Porter Hodge. So these guys are all on my all job team. We had a Miller, we had a Farmer, and we had a Porter. And they got the win, the loss, and the save in a major league game. Jeff, as I've told you many times, don't be like me. You can do way better than this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is here comes Billy Sports Writer to the plate. I don't think your job is gonna be up there, but I like those. That's a good Kurkjian for you, Dad.
Good. Let's move on to this date in baseball history. Happy birthday to Rod Carew. If I hear he was born in 1943, if I hear one more time that Rod Carew wouldn't be a good hitter in this day and age, I'm just going to throw up, Jeff, okay? He was an absolute magician at the plate. And if they played him the way they play everyone else, he would bunt 300 in a season because he's the single greatest bunter that I've ever seen.
And I think he has the greatest batting stance of all time. I just have to throw that in there.
Wrists like water. Birthday. I used to imitate his batting stance all the time. Love Rod Carew.
Right.
Also, happy birthday to Mark McGwire. And I'm hopelessly in the minority on this, but go look at those career numbers, Jeff, and look at the number of times he reached base. I understand there's a performance-enhancing element here, but he's a Hall of Famer for me and one of the great power hitters of all time. Also, this is the date that Roger Maris hit number 61, breaking Babe Ruth's record for home runs in a season. And this is also the date that Babe had the famous called shot against Charlie Root in the 1932 World Series. And we both have a shirt, right, Jeff, that says called shot, right?
Yeah, from our friends at Baseballism. We both have that shirt on.
Right. So those are just a few things that happen on this date in baseball history.
Gonna take a team out of our lid here. We've taken quite a few. We're not quite to all 30, and it couldn't have been more perfect to have Mr. National himself, Ryan Zimmerman, on when we pull the Washington Nationals out of our lid.
Right.
Great.
Ryan Zimmerman's the greatest player in the history of the Nationals, Jeff. He came up at age 20, and they just threw him in the lineup at third base every day. They threw him in the middle of the order and basically told him, this is your team now. And that team was terrible, and he did such a marvelous job, not only performing on the field, but helping pull everyone together in that clubhouse and teaching a lot of those guys how to play the game properly, which no 20-year-old is supposed to be doing. Others are supposed to be teaching him. Trust me, I was there. He was teaching them. And we talked about walk-off homers, Jeff. Ryan Zimmerman hit 11 walk-off homers in his career. And during our interview, he will explain his most famous walk-off homer, which is so good. By the way, the record for walk-off homers in baseball history is 13 by Jim Thome.
Hey, Dad, so I want to get to our best of all, Tim, which has been really a lot of fun to put together. Every single week you put an interesting team. But I first have to just give a shout-out to so many people who listen to Is This a Great Game or What, who have sent us best of all Tim teams to our website, greatgameorwhat.com. Rich Permenter sent us 2, Dad. And I'm not going to get into the lineups of each, but I just want to send him some appreciation for his all-animal team, which involves, of course, the likes of Jimmy Fox and Tim Salmon and Mike Trout and Catfish Hunter. But then he came up with one, Dad, that really made me laugh. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but he put together the every Tom, Dick, and Harry team.
The all Tom, Dick, and Harry team? Every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Love it. So
every Tom, Dick, and Harry. So he's got Harry Davis as his first baseman, Dick Groat as his shortstop, Tom Seaver, Tom Glavine, Tom Browning. It's just great. He did an amazing job putting that together, and I just had to throw him some appreciation and some love for everybody who's done one, especially I thought the creativity of the every Tom, Dick, and Harry team was great.
I love it. And thanks for everyone for being as stupid as me and spending and wasting all of your time coming up with this. I have found this is what people really like. It makes me really happy, and I'm going to keep doing it. I don't care if anyone makes fun of me or not. But this week, Jeff, we have to be a little bit serious because it's October the 1st. So I decided instead of the eclipse team or whatever we had earlier this year that we would do something a little more serious with the greatest player at each position doing something memorable or tremendous in October. Okay, now this is very subjective. I want everyone else to come up with your own, but our catcher is Carlton Fisk, of course, who hit the home run off the foul pole in Game 6 of the 75 World Series. I was a sophomore in college, Jeff, and it was unbelievable how our dorm, nobody rooting for the Red Sox or the Reds, went absolutely crazy because back then people used to watch the World Series. It didn't matter who was in it. You watched because it was the greatest spectacle ever. First base is Albert Pujols, who hit 3 home runs in Game 3 of the 2011 World Series. Second baseman is Bill Mazeroski, who hit the biggest home run, I believe, in Major League history, a walk-off home run to beat the Yankees 10-9 in Game 7 of the 60 World Series. And I'm going to tell you this one more time, Jeff, 0 strikeouts in that game. Final score, 10-9, Game 7 of the World Series, 0 strikeouts. If we play 7 games in the World Series this year, I promise you we'll have 20 strikeouts in that game. There were 0. All right, third baseman is David Freese, 2011. Final game. I mean, it's Game 6. This is it. If he makes an out, the game's over and they lose, and the Rangers win the World Series. Instead, he hits a game-tying triple. And then in the 11th inning, he had a walk-off homer to win that game. And then, of course, the Cardinals won Game 7 to win the World Series. The shortstop is Derek Jeter, Game 4, 2001 World Series. Home run off of Byung-Hyun Kim of the Diamondbacks. And the game lasted so long that he hit the home run after midnight. So he became Mr.
November.
Mr. October, of course, is Reggie Jackson. And what a coincidence. He's next on the list. Game 6, 1977. Reggie hit 3 home runs in one game. He hit him off first Bert Hooton, then Elias Sosa, then Charlie Huff. 3 homers, Jeff, on 3 pitches. Not 3 pitchers, yes. 3 pitches, 3 home runs. Amazing.
That's incredible.
All right, Kirby Puckett, Game 6 of the 91 World Series, the greatest World Series I've ever covered. 3 for 4. He had a walk-off homer to win 4-3, made a tremendous defensive play. And when he left the ballpark the night before, he told everyone, fellas, get on my back. I'm going to take us home. And then he went out and had one of the greatest World Series performances ever.
Ever since I was a little kid, I always thought Kirby Puckett sounded more like a hockey player, but I think it's just because his last name has Puck in it.
Right, of course. He also sounds like a musician, Kirby Puckett, and
yeah. We should do maybe in the off season, Dad, we'll do a deep dive on players that don't sound like they're doing the right job. Right, you know how our friend Stan Lebatard, they do the looks like, right? Like guys who looks like they do other things. We should do players that sound like they should be doing a different job.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Love it. Okay, just to finish, Joe Carter, 1993, walk-off homer in Game 6 to win the World Series for the Blue Jays. Our pinch hitter is Kirk Gibson, who hit a pinch hit homer to win Game 1 of the 1988 World Series, limped his way around the bases. There are about 100 stories to go with that, but I'm not going to tell you any because we're running late. Our starting pitcher, of course, is Don Larson, who pitched a perfect game in Game 5 of the 1956 World Series. By any definition, that has to be the greatest single game pitching performance ever. And our relief pitcher is a starter, but in this case, Madison Bumgarner of the Giants, who in 2014 pitched a 4-hit shutout in Game 5 of the World Series and then came back in Game 7 and pitched 5 scoreless innings in relief to protect a 3-2 lead.
Wow.
So, of all the great Mariano Rivera things, a 5-inning relief appearance by a starting pitcher who pitched a shutout 3 nights earlier, I think that's got to go.
Our Kurkjian Quandary this week is going to have baseball fans of any organization really scratching their heads when it comes to what means the most. Dad, what do you have?
Well, since it's October 1st, I thought we should have a quandary about October baseball involving teams. The Marlins we've chosen, 1993, they debuted. Since then, they have a .459 winning percentage, and they have the third worst record in the major league since they debuted in 1993. They've lost 100 games 4 times and been to the playoffs only 4 times, never finished first in any season, but they won the World Series twice. The question is, what team has been more successful? The Marlins, I just gave you all the bad and the good, or I'm going to choose the Guardians here because during that same time frame, they played .531 baseball, which is almost 100 percentage points higher than that of the Marlins. But they've won 0 World Series. They've been to the playoffs 14 times. They've never lost 100 games in a season. They went to the World Series 3 times, losing each time, but they've never won the World Series. So the question is, what franchise has either been more successful, or which one would you rather be a fan of? A team that fails repeatedly but has won 2 World Series, or a team that's been pretty darn good for a long time but hasn't won a World Series?
That's a really good Kurkjian Quandary. So breaking it down here, you get the 2 World Series wins. And this is funny, Dad, because this is 1993 you've chosen, which is the year I was born. So I can just reference my lifetime as a 31-year-old to be able to kind of understand how long that has been. And I lived in Cleveland for quite a few years. I was at Game 7 of the World Series in 2016 when the Cubs took it from underneath the Cleveland then Indians, and how heartbreaking that was for the fans. So, the argument is, would you take all of the heartbreak in the sense of getting so close? 14 times, it's almost half of the seasons we're talking about. They're making the playoffs, and they're not winning the World Series. Dad, I'm telling you, though, I would rather have a competitive team every single year, or at least half the years, or at least competing for a playoff spot every year, than losing 100 games 4 times and then only making the playoffs 4 times. So then you're just a mediocre team that's losing a lot. But I don't think a World Series win outweighs enough time of being that bad for that long, to be completely honest.
All right. I would rather be the Indians/Guardians and be competitive every year because I'm giving my fans something to watch. So we'll leave it up to our best fans and our best listeners and our best viewers to see what they think.
That's right. You can chime in right now. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Great game or what? Every single week, our friends at Stratomatic help us out with a simulation a lot of the times that you ask for. And this one, Dad, you mentioned that we were going to be bringing up the Chicago White Sox once again on this podcast. And this is where they're coming up. Stratomatic, market leader in sports simulations. We asked them to take this year's Chicago White Sox team and put them up against arguably the other worst team in Major League Baseball history, the 1962 Mets.
Right. And the Mets, of course, went 40-120, and the White Sox finished 41-121. So we decided to put the 2 worst teams, at least most losses, certainly, in modern Major League history, that's 1900 on, play them in a 7-game series and see how it turns out. So how did it turn out?
Well, Stratomatic put it all together for us, and we got to 7 games, Dad, to find out which of these teams is truly the worst. Jay Hook pitched a complete game in Game 7, and Sammy Taylor hit a grand slam in the 4th inning to give the Mets Game 7 victory, 7-5, over the 2024 Chicago White Sox.
The White Sox allowed 60 runs in 7 games. And even though Luis Robert hit 448 in this 7-game series, the Mets came back to win. They won Game 6, Jeff, 18-3. And then they won 7-5. Sammy Taylor, who hit 3 home runs during the 1962 season, hit the big grand slam to win in Game 7. And this is my favorite, Jay Hook, Jeff, famous pitcher from the 62 Mets who went 8-19 that season. He pitched a complete game. Final score 7-5. What people don't realize, I'm sure, is that Jay Hook had 13 complete games in 1962. Max Scherzer is one of our warriors, a Hall of Fame pitcher, Jeff. He has 12 complete games in his career. Jay Hook went 8-19 in 1962 with 13 complete games and pitched a complete game to win the World Series against the 2024 White Sox.
It really is incredible. Big shout out. Thank you to our friends at Stratomatic. And if you have a simulation you want us to run with them, you can let us know at Great Game or What. Our guest is Ryan Zimmerman today. What an exciting guest we have. Mr. National, as we call him.
Yeah, and he's going to make us laugh. He's going to teach us about baseball. He's going to tell us about October. He's going to tell us about raising kids. Love Ryan Zimmerman.
Here he is right now on Is This a Great Game or What?
Welcome back to Is This a Great Game or What? And our guest this week is Ryan Zimmerman, in my opinion, the greatest player in the history of the Washington Nationals. Ryan, this is my son, Jeff. We do our own podcast, father and son. How great is that?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. It's got to be a blast for you to talk baseball and obviously other things, but to have him do it with you has got to be pretty special, I would assume.
Of course. And Ryan, we do talk a lot about things other than baseball. So we're going to start with you with basketball. I asked you this morning, when's the last time you dunked a basketball? So tell us the last time you dunked a basketball and what were the circumstances of that?
Yeah, so, well, a couple basketball stories. I loved playing basketball growing up. I played like AAU basketball in the Virginia Beach area where there's some pretty good players. So I was probably like the 6th or 7th guy on the team, but I played. I never played in high school. I feel like I played summer baseball, and then once high school started, I just didn't want to put the time in. But I loved the game so much so that I would play it a lot. Now that I'm retired, and actually, me and Max Scherzer used to use it as like an off-season conditioning, and we would go to Georgetown, and they would let us use their gym, and we would play anywhere from 3-on-3 or 5-on-5 full court. But it was more for conditioning, so me and Max would always guard each other so that we knew nobody would get hurt. You know, we played, you're not really allowed to contest anything going to the hoop. You know, we didn't want any, I love Booney, but we didn't want any Booney incidents happening.
Right.
So we did that, and then the slam dunk story I was telling you about goes back to a fantasy football draft, not this year, but last year with my buddies at home from Virginia Beach. And, you know, about an hour and a half in, people are always ready to talk a little crap because they've had a couple beers or something like that. And so there was a wager that came up that said I wouldn't be able to dunk anymore. So I said, well, I'm still, 6'2", 6'3", and they're like, yeah, well, you're 39, almost 40 years old. No way you can do it. So I filmed it, and I will say it took me 3 or 4 tries because the first few I got a little nervous. I didn't know if I could still do it, but I ended up doing it. So yeah, I can still get up a little bit. You know, I wouldn't say I'm as spry as I used to be, but yeah, I mean, I love the sport of basketball. I love playing it, and was happy that I could still dunk. But it wasn't pretty, but I got it done.
And I'm glad that you and Max Scherzer would pair up, so you're not going up against a sophomore poli-sci major or something.
Well, and when you play with Max, you know, there's always Max rules. So
explain.
You're playing. So like we would go work out and then use that as our conditioning. So our strength, the head strength guy used to live in the area, and he used to throw at Georgetown So either the pitching coach or someone for Georgetown would let them into the facility to do that. So we would have sort of that kind of group. And then if the Georgetown basketball team was in there, maybe some of their student, coaches and stuff would join sometimes. Ewing was watching us play one time because it was before their practice. But so Max I think we would play to 15 or, gosh, I forget it was 15 or 16. I think it was 16 because when you got to 8, you had to stop and you had to hit free throws because he said, I want people to shoot free throws when they're exhausted. So that they could mentally see what it's like to try and perform in the clutch. And then the only way to win the game was to hit your free throws at the end of the game. And then obviously whoever lost had to do suicides or something like that. It's just such it literally kind of just wraps Max up in a nutshell in a game of pickup off-season basketball that he then has 7 weird rules that somehow ultimately probably help him win the game. He always had special rules for him, and we used to call him Max Madoff because he would win everything he did.
So none of this surprised you from Max, right?
Oh no. I mean, I went into it expecting some of this, but he also because of that makes everyone around him better, compete more, and at the end of the day really want to win because they don't want Max to win. So that's the kind of person he was, obviously on the field, but literally everything he did, that's what he would do. And it was annoying sometimes, but it makes everyone around you better.
So the same guy who's snorting and snarling on the mound, that's him on the basketball court in 3-on-3, 5-on-5 in the off season.
Oh yeah, and when we didn't, I'll be honest, when it was the 3-on-3 and we're running full court,
right? Because
we're doing it just for conditioning. So it was quite the workout, but it was it's obviously, I'm telling the story now. It's something I'll never forget. But we had a blast doing it, and it made me remember how much I love basketball.
Right. How's your fantasy football team doing? Are you still in the league with your boys?
Yeah, we do. I do a league at home with my Virginia Beach buddies. I do a league with my UVA buddies that I played baseball with, and those are both kind of keeper leagues where it's more just for keeping in touch and, smack talk and things like that. And then I do one real league with some older baseball guys like Hinsky and the Upton brothers and McCann and Hudson and a few others. So that one's a little bit more serious, I would say.
Yeah, of that group, who would you say, and if it's you, don't be humble, is the best fantasy manager?
Oh man, I think being the best fantasy manager is about just being kind of lucky. I mean, whoever has their
least amount of injuries.
Exactly. Whoever's first 4 picks stay healthy, for the most part, I feel is in a good chance. And there's always the 1 or 2 guys that people pick up off the waiver wire, like the running back for the Rams last year that basically won the league for people.
Mm-hmm.
I just love it because it keeps everyone together. I mean, all of us are in the same kind of, time frame in our lives where a bunch of us have kids, a bunch of us are so busy, and it's hard to keep in touch. And this makes you, communicate and makes you at least every weekend kind of feel free to reach out. So I love it because it keeps people in contact during these busy times of our lives. And, obviously competition always makes things a little bit better.
Right. Do you have a name for your fantasy team?
I usually try and use a team, a player to make a team name. But the last 2 or 3 years, I've been so lazy.
Right.
And I'll be all right, tonight I'm going to do it. And then by 9:30, the kids are just now getting to bed. So it's Team Zim has been the name for the last few years.
Let's pivot here to golf, Ryan. How much do you play? How good are you? And don't be humble about this either. And how much do you love playing golf now that you're retired?
Yeah. So golf is one of the things that I escape and do. I play a ton in the spring and a ton in the fall. The summer is just, we're busy, we're traveling, and honestly, when it's 95 and humid here, the last thing I want to do is go walk or play 18 holes of golf. But now when the kids are back in school, I try and play once or twice a week, and it's fun for me to get out. It's something I can compete in, and I have a good group around here. There's some hockey guys that still live here, and we play quite a bit, and it gives you something. So it's fun.
Is there one player, former player or celebrity or somebody that you've had a chance to play with that really blew you away? Maybe you underestimated how good they were.
I actually just played in the 9/11 first responder program for the Solheim Cup. That was at RTJ for the Women's Solheim Cup. I've actually played with Ron Rivera, the old coach of the Commanders and the Panthers, obviously, legend in the NFL. And we each played with a first responder, and we played 9 holes, but you teed off, on the first hole, and we played on Wednesday and it started on Friday. So everything was set up, and there wasn't a lot of people, but the most people I've ever played with in front of. And, I told him I wish I had one of those Whoop bands or the heartbeat monitor on when I stepped up. I was trying to put the ball on the tee, and everyone's like, why do you get nervous? You used to play in front of 50, 60,000 people. And, I say it's something that people assume you're going to be good at. So you think you're going to have to go up there and be a PGA player. But so I guess us as athletes always put so much pressure on ourselves to be good at it. But yeah, we do that. I play with TJ Oshie and Nick Backstrom a bunch, to the old kind of retired Caps. We're all around the same, so we have some good matches, and there's some great courses to play around here.
Right, Ryan, baseball players are really good golfers. So are hockey players. Have you played with someone who just hits it off the end of the world, that even you, who I'm sure hits it a million miles, you look at it and go, I can't believe how far that guy can hit it?
Yeah, I mean, those TJ Oshie hits it a mile. John Carlson, the defenseman that plays for the Caps, still hits it a ton. It's amazing to see those guys, and it's just my favorite thing about the game of golf is it really is the only sport that has a system that levels the playing field. So whether you're a low 1, 2, 3 handicap, or you're playing someone who's an 11 or a 12, it always seems to come down, to 1 6-foot putt, or one, the last hole, which, for me is that's what I'm out there for. That's what I'm trying to replace is, that feeling of you against the pitcher when it comes to the end of the game. Honestly, that's the biggest thing you miss when you retire. You love playing the game, you love being around the guys, but there's really nothing in what I call civilian life that can replicate, you trying to get that game-winning hit in the 9th inning.
I know that T-ball isn't exactly getting the heart going, but is it cool to have your kiddos in sports? What is it like when Ryan Zimmerman shows up to his son's T-ball game? Or is anybody like, all right, Zim, can you help us out with some tips for the kids?
Well, yeah, Henry, we missed his first 2 games because we had weddings to go to, actually. So last Saturday was his first T-ball game ever, and really my first T-ball game ever helping. So I really had no idea what I was getting into. And I mean, they all loved it. So I guess that makes it the best, because I asked Henry, he woke up the next day and asked if he had a T-ball game again the next day. And I said, no, buddy, those are only once a week and it's probably best for everybody. But they were great. I mean, the hitting off the tee was fun. It was more, the funny part to me was when they played in the field, and it was 4 kids in the field, including my 2.5-year-old who came along. So Henry's out there, he's 4, and then Benjamin's 2.5, and it's just someone barely hits the ball off the tee, and then it's 4 or 5 kids running and converging on the ball at the same time. It looked like an onside kick almost, more than T-ball. And then for 10 seconds they wrestle and they try and get the ball, and then whoever grabs the T-ball then just stands up and fires it somewhere towards first base. and all the parents clap and everyone's, videotaping but it's fun for them. And I think that's how you get introduced to sports.
All right, Ryan, during the pandemic, I remember talking to you and I asked you something like, what's harder to do, chase 3 kids around or get a hit off of Jacob deGrom in his prime? And I think you said getting a hit off deGrom is easier. Now you have 4 kids. What is that like for you?
Yeah, yeah, well, I can confirm baseball is way easier than being home and taking care of 4 kids. Yeah, it's I mean, you get used to it obviously, and you get into a routine, and they're in school now, and but it's hard. It's a different type of grind, and I'm such like a type A routine person, and when I was playing, everyone always asks, what's your superstition? What did you do when you played? And for me, it wasn't so much a superstition. I just like to do things the same every day. So if I was late by, 4 or 5 minutes getting ready for the game, so I guess my superstition was just kind of, I don't say doing the same thing every day, but getting ready for the game the same way, for a 7 o'clock, a 4 o'clock, a 1 o'clock, I had, a routine that I would do. Now, trying to have any sort of routine with 4 kids is about the dumbest thing you could try to do. And Heather, my wife, I'm like, the first year I'm like, I'm not like, you lose that, you're either winning or losing. You're competing. We've talked about that a lot. Like, you're not winning or losing the day with kids. Like, you don't see immediate, return on investment, I guess you can say. And how she has kind of coached me is like, listen, you're home now. You're home a lot more than a lot of other dads are able to be home. You might not see it every day, but the kids are never going to forget kind of you being home in this stage in their life. But Heather's kept me in check and kept me grounded, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, you brought up your wife, Heather. You got married at the Mellon Auditorium in Washington, D.C., and my sister got married in the same place, which is just crazy. Yeah. And poor dad's still recovering from that. And that was back in 2019, right?
Yeah. Ryan, do you have any money left from the wedding? Because I don't. It's all gone.
My wife was actually born in DC. So she's has DC on her birth certificate, which is pretty cool, which a bunch of people around here aren't born here. That's such a transient city. All of our kids were born in DC as well. So that she was like, we need to get married in the city. So I say she looked around at venues and settled on that one. And I've said this so much. I mean, DC is such a cool city. There's things you can do there that you can't do anywhere else in the world. I've said a bunch of times too, at night, I would drive home from games sometimes, and instead of taking the highway home, I'd go down Constitution, and on a Wednesday night at midnight, there's basically nobody out there, and you got the windows down in the car, and you're looking at museums and monuments and the White House, and so to be able to kind of get married right there on Constitution, and this city's become such a big part of my life, and Heather grew up here, so it's a huge part of our family's life. But yeah, the Mellon is now every time we drive by it, our kids say that's where mom and dad got married and all this stuff. But yeah, it was obviously it's a night you'll never forget, and yeah, hopefully you recovered, Tim. I feel bad for you.
No, I have recovered well. All right, before we get to real baseball, Ryan, again, these are the things that I collect because I have nothing else to do with my life. But you have the most career home runs of anyone whose last name begins with a Z. Now, I know that's totally worthless, but guys like me love stuff like that. Are you aware of that? And do you feel even better about yourself today since I told you that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think I was aware, but that's just smart. I mean, if I have a last name of S or T, right, or it's like, I guess me, like what, W, Z, Y, U, probably those are the groups you want to be a part of. Yeah, anytime you can be the leader of anything in MLB. I think you definitely have to take it and run with it. But yeah, I actually, someone told me that a couple years ago, and I looked it up. But yeah, it's a good thing to have on your resume.
Right. And here's how pathetic I am, Ryan. You became the all-time Z, and Chase Utley became the all-time U within like a 3-week period. And I went, oh my
Right.
gosh, we have 2 changes of the guard here. And everyone's looking at me like, what's wrong with you? But I love that stuff.
So I grew up in the DMV, right? I grew up in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I'm currently, in spirit of this interview, I'm rocking the sweatshirt I bought shortly before the 2019 World Series. I was actually living in Las Vegas at the time, flew back to go see games at Nationals Park. Now, obviously, you remember 0 wins at Nationals Park, and you win all the games on the road. So all my buddies growing up were like, can they please win a game? And then they win the World Series, and it was great, and it was amazing. I also had the opportunity to go to the first ever Nationals game at RFK Stadium. And then I was at when Nationals Park opened up. Now, I'm not making this about me. You hit a walk-off home run in the first ever game at Nationals Park. Talk about christening a ballpark. Is that a pretty cool feeling for you to know that you have that under your belt?
Yeah, and I think a lot of things about my career has been it's almost crazy how it all worked out. I mean, grew up in Virginia Beach, went to UVA, got drafted by the Nationals, came into an organization that was basically rebuilding. Who knows if I would have been in the big leagues as soon as I was if I was with a different organization. It's just funny how all these things seem to happen. And, you see a lot of stories like that in sports. And that's, to me, what's so awesome about all sports is the stories and the people that are involved in it. And that night, it's funny. I obviously remember that at bat. I remember lots of at bats, and I could tell you every pitch when I'm sitting there looking at the computer screen what it's going to be. 0-0, 1-0, 1-1. But that night we were playing the Braves, and Peter Moreland was pitching, who is one of the best humans on the face of the planet, by the way.
Hilariously funny, right?
Unbelievable. And McCann was catching, who I became really good friends with because we sort of came up around the same time and played against each other for years. And Peter Moreland, if you go back and look at the at-bat, the first pitch was like a fastball, I'll say right down the middle. It might have been a little low in the strike zone, not low out of the strike zone. And I forget who the umpire was, but he balled it. And I kind of took it, and I heard ball, and I was like, oh, man. And I looked back at McCann, and like he kind of like he was like, I don't know where that's at. So like, but it's funny because that pitch like completely turned the at bat for me. So instead of being down 0-1 against Peter Moreland, who throws a heavy sinker and then has a slider that you have to worry about as a right-handed hitter, but he's more the sinker guy. So now I'm 1-0 instead of 0-1, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just selling out for that sinker that I just saw. I basically got a free look at it so I could see what it was going to do. And then obviously the next pitch is when I hit the home run. But those are the kind of things that you dream about and want to be a part of. And, I always say the walk-off home runs and the game-winning hits and all that, like, everyone says, oh, how'd you have so much success in those situations? And I said, well, if you look at the numbers, I don't know if I had that much success. I got out plenty of times too, but I think the biggest thing is I think you have to want to be in those situations. And I got a chance to do one of the UVA commencement speeches this year, and I was scared to death, and it took me two months to write it. But I'm like, what am I going to tell these kids that now have a college degree, of which I don't have, and I'm up here giving these guys advice. But one of the things was sort of that part of my career is I was known as getting walk-off hits. And I said, I didn't really have a great plan or anything. I said, the only thing is I wanted to be in that situation. I would rather be in that situation with a chance to win the game and fail than not have a chance to win or lose the game.
Ryan, so October baseball is upon us, and you have quite a bit of experience in October baseball. Yeah. When you talk about that mentality, what are these players feeling right now, especially some of the younger guys who might be doing this for the very first time?
Oh, man, there's nothing like October baseball. And, we, like you said, we had a lot of experience in October. A lot of it was never past the first round, unfortunately. But I think all those failed experiences led us ultimately to 2019. And very rarely do you see a team or a core group of guys on a team get to the playoffs and make a run to the World Series or win the World Series that first time. And October baseball is just so much different than regular season baseball. I mean, everything's magnified. You have to take advantages of the mistakes. If a starting pitcher gives up 3 or 4 runs in 2 innings, they're out of the game. So it's just such a different animal in the postseason. But I think the coolest thing about the 2019 run was, being in the first round, however many times it was before we got past the first round. You kind of see the media and, the concentration or the focus on your series in that first round. And then we finally got past the first round, and the second round it gets a little bit more. And then you keep going, and then you get to the World Series. And I just thought the World Series was the greatest stage. You walk out for that first time when you're taking BP, and you're like 4 people deep from third base to first base around the field of media and people there to watch BP. And I just remember walking out there and be like, holy cow, this is like the coolest thing I've ever done. This is why you work. This is what you want to get to. And I'll never forget that night in Houston, looking at the big out of town scoreboard in left field there and seeing only the one game.
So good.
And like,
Wow.
I get like goosebumps, like talking about it now, but like you're the only game in the world of baseball that matters, like on this night. It's just a really, really cool feeling that night.
And what was the feeling like when you won the World Series? Did you cry? Who did you call? What was that like?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that inning, I think we were up 4 runs, something like that, and we got 1 out, and then I played for a long time, so I enjoy talking to people on the field. I'm relaxed on the field. Everyone's like, how do you talk to this person, that person? And I made pretty good relationships with all the umpires. And I'll never forget, we got the first out, and I turned to the umpire, and he's like, hey, Zim, congrats, man. Like, couldn't happen to a better person. I'm so happy for you. And I'm like, dude, there's 1 out. Like, what are you doing? The superstitious baseball person like really kicked in, and he's like, dude, you're fine. Like, I just wanted to do it before it happened because it's going to be crazy. And so I remember that. And then obviously Huddy strikes out Brantley, and from there it gets a little cloudy. You just kind of like, you work so hard to get to that point. And then I remember running over and me and Rendon jumping and hugging each other, like basically like what my son's T-ball kids did the other day. So I guess we revert all the way back to the beginning. The ride with that team was so crazy. And, everyone was like, oh, did you go party that night? Did you go? And once you finally like calmed down and went inside, you were just mentally exhausted from that run, because every single pitch, especially in the playoffs and of course in the World Series, I mean, you were locked in on every single pitch to the point where by like midnight or 1 o'clock that night, I was probably the most tired I've ever been after a baseball game.
All right, Jeff, last question for you.
I just want to hear, just because, we have a couple of these guys you had the opportunity to play with that are still in the game and going to be experiencing some October baseball. Juan Soto, Trey Turner specifically, who were on that team back in 2019. Give us a little bit on these 2 guys, because from the outside looking in as a fan, wow, they're both incredible athletes, and you were teammates with them. What sets them apart?
Yeah, 2 of the greatest players in our game right now, I think. And it helps that they're probably 2 of the best people as well. I mean, we'll start with Juan. I think you can't watch him play and not smile, I think, because that's all he does, and, he just works hard. I mean, the story about him wanting to learn English and learning English in less than a year. And, they're saying you can have a translator in your interviews. And he's saying, no, the only way I'm going to learn is go out there and speak English and do it. And like, I tell that story because that's him. If he's going to do something, he's going to work, he's going to perfect it, and he's going to go out and do it. And, anything from learning English to being arguably the best hitter on the planet. And then Trey, just probably one of the most exciting players on the field at all times. The one thing I will say about both of them is their baseball IQs and them knowing how to play the game reminds me of, I don't want to sound like an old man, get off my lawn here, stuff like that. But, the game has changed a little bit, and we have some of the most talented, athletically gifted people, I think, that have ever played the game of baseball. But I think the baseball IQ and knowing the little things, and, a lot of the things that we were taught at a young age, I think a lot of these kids don't get taught that anymore. And they learn it, obviously. They learn the game, but Juan and Trey, like Trey from the day he came up was one of my favorite players because he played the game hard. He played the game the right way. He never made excuses. I mean, that dude played with a broken finger for like the entire season.
All right, last thing for me, hopefully will leave us with a smile. I was doing a game with Aaron Boone in the booth from Seattle like 10 years ago, and Ryan Zimmerman sends a text to Aaron Boone during the game and said, tell Tim to fix his headset. He looks ridiculous. Do you remember that?
So that's one of my favorite things to do is, and I've been doing some TV now with the Nats.
Right.
So I understand like now how ridiculous it is to text people, but like I love like doing stupid stuff like that because like, when you're doing the game every single day, or when you do like, something like that makes you smile and breaks up the monotony of just calling a baseball game. Like, to me, that's the coolest thing about baseball is I played with Booney 1 or 2 years, knew his dad really well because he was with the Nationals organization for a while. But I think that just shows you the game of baseball. Like, I'll text Booney all the time now, or they were in town playing the other day, and I brought my kids out there because they wanted to meet Aaron Judge and all that stuff. And, I think there's nothing that really brings people together like playing on a Major League Baseball team together. And to the point where I can feel comfortable enough to text him and tell Timmy to fix his headset on national TV. I mean, I'm like, Aaron, like, maybe you should have told him. You can't let your good buddy be on national TV like that. That's like the person who doesn't tell you have spinach in your teeth.
Right.
You gotta. That's a terrible friend.
And Ryan, thank you so much for smiling with us today and having a laugh with us today and sharing with us today. And we're so thrilled that you could still dunk it. That is so great.
Yeah, well, I didn't show you I was in the cold tub for the next 3 days. But other than that, we'll leave that part out. But yeah, thanks for having me. It's it was an honor to be on with you guys, and so cool to see you being able to do this with your son. And yeah, thanks for everything you've done for the game, Tim. It's pretty cool.
Thank you, Ryan Zimmerman, for being an amazing guest for our October edition of Is This a Great Game or What? And we will be coming to you weekly, mind you, during the playoffs. So just keep up with us if you can during this exciting time in Major League Baseball. Now, Dad, you mentioned and you congratulated Ryan Zimmerman for having the most home runs for a guy with the last name Z. That's the very last letter in the alphabet. Can you give me A through
all right,
Y?
We're going to run through these quickly, all right? A is Hank Aaron. B, Barry Bonds. C, Miguel Cabrera. D, Carlos Delgado. E, Edwin Encarnacion. F, Jimmy Fox. G, Ken Griffey Jr. H, I love this, shared by Frank and Ryan Howard. They have the same last name. Raul Ibanez is I. Reggie Jackson is J. K. Harmon Killebrew. L is Carlos Lee. M is Willie Mays. N, Greg Nettles. O, David Ortiz. P, Albert Pujols. Q, hard one, Carlos Quentin. R is Babe Ruth. S, Sammy Sosa. T, Jim Thome. U, the aforementioned Chase Utley. V, I love this, Joey Votto, who finished with 356. His final home run of his major league career put him past Greg Vaughn for the most homers ever by someone whose last name starts with a V. W, of course, Ted Williams. There is no one named X. No one named X has ever played in the major leagues, let alone hit a homer. Y is Carl Yastrzemski. And Z is our guest from this week, the great Ryan Zimmerman.
Pretty amazing, Dad. I love that you came up with that, and I'm glad you could share 26 other letters with us at the end of the podcast. So next Tuesday, we will have a whole lot to talk about. We will be in the middle of an American League and National League Division series. We're excited. Don't forget, Dad will be broadcasting the Astros series in Houston with Michael Kay and Todd Frazier. So make sure to be watching that, Dad, and enjoy your time in Houston.
Jeff, it's October baseball. Nothing, I repeat, nothing is better than that.
Thank you for listening. And as always, thank you for being a part of our family.